parent writes out to the school. Is that I know it's applied towards the cost, but where in the budget line does that, because that's money in. So how much would that money be? Because that would offset, I don't know if it does or it doesn't, I'm just asking.
Refer to the
would
only
have to
student
show up.
activity fund we have are for yearbooks and things like that at the high school, but I'll let you talk to.
It's for
Yep.
field trips or
Yeah,
some
if it's-
sports
if it's-
activities.
Well, there's a
You're
couple
right, a
different-
parent usually writes out a check all the time for
Yes,
something.
it depends on
So
what
where
we're,
does that go?
depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about for like a booster club, say for example, the girls cross country team does a flower sale in the spring.
Mhm.
That money goes into the boosters account.
Okay,
It's usually parent run. Another one is the senior parent graduation night.
right.
That goes into their account. People might write a check to the high school,
activity fee, but
and
then
then
it
we
goes
write a
in-
check to that group. So it's not funds that we house necessarily or
Right.
draw off of. It's a separate.
So every student activity fee, whether it's to the booster groups or anything that the school kind of like a fiduciary as a depository and then it goes back out, none of that is applied towards any of the sports program or music programs that parents are writing checks out for? I'm not saying that, I'm just wondering, where is that shown anywhere? That would
Again,
actually boost your argument as to how much contribution is being made to sustain, that we know it happens, but it's just like, I know it's not, so it never goes in, it doesn't come into the town, right?
Again, if it's a parent organization,
Right.
the parents manage that.
So the student
They-
activity fee is a parent organization?
Let me clarify activity fees.
Right.
At the high school, years past, there used to be activity fees, lab fees, things like that. We were not allowed to have those fees.
Okay.
So those fees no longer exist.
Okay.
So when we're talking about fees, that's a separate conversation.
Mhm.
If you're talking about booster clubs,
Mhm.
like the football booster club, we'll take that for example.
Mhm.
The boosters raise money, various fundraising activities, and then they pay for things like lunches or dinners, team dinners, where they get pizza or pasta.
Mhm.
That's all, they raise the money, they use the money for their
Mhm.
events. It's all on them. It's not an East Lyme High School event, nor is it our funds. It's their funds.
No, right. So there's no student activity fees at all?
No, there's no.
There's no more checks written out to a student activity fee for whatever reason?
No, we do have two areas that we do have pay to play. One is freshman lacrosse, and that's through the Boosters Club, where we can't afford to pay for a freshman coach. So the boosters said, okay, we want a freshman program, so we will make this available through this vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is hockey.
Mm-hmm.
We only have one or two, sometimes three students that play hockey. Hockey is a very expensive sport, so we do a co-op with other schools. But to do that, the students or their families have to pay a fee to belong to that group. So we don't have pay-to-play per se. Those two areas we kind of do,
Mhm.
but the rest of our program is not pay-to-play. And if I can just clarify that as well, the philosophy behind that and the financial benefits. We have about just shy of 1,100 students at our school. We have approximately 850 of those 1,100 students participate in some activity at the high school, whether it's band, chorus, lacrosse, what have you. Out of that number, for athletics specifically, we have students, the number is approximately 600 that participate in more than one sport, mostly three sports. Those are big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to the philosophy with having students participate, there is a ton of research out there that supports the more that students are engaged and involved in the school community, the higher their attendance rate, the higher their academic grades, the lower their discipline rate. Again, it's getting them involved in the academics, but the fabric and fiber of the community. The other piece, too, is they're with us for many hours after school. They're not in your neighborhoods or around the community, just hanging around. They're engaged. They have an adult present. There's still an educational component to that. So there's a lot of value to that. So from the benefits for the students as far as academics and social, as well as the high school continuing to educate them well after the hours of 2:15, there are a lot of benefits compared to if we went to a pay-to-play, where any way you slice this piece of pie, it's still coming out of the community. So whether it's in the Board of Ed budget or whether you go pay-to-play, the same parents are paying the taxes. So if I'm a taxpayer in this community and I have 3 children in the high school who play multiple sports, not only do I have to pay for their cleats, their shin guards, whatever the other equipment that comes along with that particular sport, now on top of that, I have to pay for a fee, whether it's $75, $100, $150, you multiply that by 3 children at once, that fee gets, those fees add up quickly. And what happens is then the students don't end up participating. And then if you look at the research as far as what works well for students, we're going against that, and they're not engaged. Now they're somewhere else other than at the high school. So philosophically speaking, as a high school principal, I wholeheartedly support providing athletics and activities for students for all of those benefits.
Mike, I hope I didn't come across in any way as not supporting sports, because
Not at all.
rah,
Not at all.
rah, I'm in.
Thank you.
That's not it.
Do you know Ken
These are
Ward
hard
from-
choices that we have to make, and I'm just trying to suggest areas that we can take a look at and see if we can make some improvements, because there really are a lot of people in town that are hurting, and I think we don't have their voice here, and they need to be heard, and that's all I'm advocating for. It's just for us to try to figure out, be creative, if this is an area we can take a look at.
Along the same lines, while you're still up there, last year's budget was $50,000 for equipment. This year's request is $50,000 for equipment, and when I go to your big book and say, what school is that being spent at? It's all being spent at the high school. What equipment, could you more closely define equipment?
Sure.
Mr. Kelly, where are you referring?
Where am I?
Yeah, which book?
Well, I was using this at home today. Okay? And if I,
I just want to answer the question correctly. Make sure
okay,
we're in the right area.
if I go down and look, the $50,000 in equipment, and if you go to your page on sports here, your budget request is $50,000 for equipment. And so I went back to 3201 and said, where is that being spent? And it's all being spent at the high school. And my question is, can you more closely define equipment? What equipment are we spending $50,000 a year on at the high school for sports?
Mr. East, you want me to answer that?
That would be great.
There are safety procedures that we have to take every year. For example, the helmets need to be reconditioned every year. That's a pretty big expense. We have a high ropes course where we have to maintain that every year, have it inspected, and invest money in it each year to keep it safe. Our athletic, our physical education department, we run every student through that department. So we have 1,100 students using the equipment every year. Things break. Tennis rackets. We go through a lot of equipment for the program. But the bigger things are, the bigger ticket items would be like the helmets and those types of things.
Okay. And you know, I was out with a friend of mine whose son plays lacrosse, and he was buying some just the
Stick.
stick and And I was just amazed at how much money he was spending on, I mean, I don't think I would have been able to play. So I understand how expensive this stuff is. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Harney?
They weren't as expensive when you were in high school, Steve. No.
No, everything was $5.
They probably didn't play lacrosse.
Right.
Lacrosse is a sport of the upper income
Yeah.
schools, communities.
I do have a question on the revenue side, because as you know, when we look at a budget, we tend to over-focus or focus more of our attention on expenditures. But clearly, to balance our budget, we look at the revenue side, and then our final catch-all is the grand list and the taxes to all our residents. I look under tuition, and I know this year we're projecting $223,000 less. Is that just the effect of Salem, or?
And you're looking at page 1.5 of the big book?
Well, I'm looking at, I don't know where it is in your big book. I'm just looking at the big book we have. I hope we have the same number.
Sure. It's not all tuition. You're looking at the bottom line, I believe.
Yeah, that's fine.
Did you use
What
Page
page?
1-5 in the big book. The big one, Steve.
1-5?
Miss,
Copy that.
Two things that are going away out of that list are the grants. We got a security grant, and which was a one-time thing. And we also have a technology grant. If you use, it's about $139,000. It's tuition-wise, we're down a little bit, maybe $20,000 from Salem. Again, there's some decline there, and what we're anticipating in enrollment.
So
But
for
if you notice,
tuition,
that security is $105,000, which is like, if you see it there. If you look up on the top grouping there, the second number from the bottom is $105,000. To the left, you'll see it says low SIP security.
Yep.
Which, and then up a little bit further, a couple lines, you'll see it says high quality schools, Common Core, $139,000. It was a technology grant. So there's a security and technology grant. So between the two, you have $244,000.
and that was a one-time deal, and that was for the implementation of the core, and one for Sandy Hook type security grant.
It's all
Right.
precipitating from that, yes.
And as far as you know, in terms of, well, Paul, you might know if there's any grants coming in the area of more Common Core implementation and support from this year's budget? I haven't heard anything. I'm just saying, you probably know.
From the state you're talking
Yeah.
about? We have heard nothing in terms of grants, other than there's that one grant for capital expenditures that are coming in that is a match that we have to put in. So we're taking some of that money out of the LEARN program to match that. But the Common
And
Core.
what would that capital grant be for?
What's that?
Security?
Yeah, security. I think it's cameras and locks and things and those types of miscellaneous events. It's 160, is that the number?
So their budget really is.
And you have to do the
Yeah.
match, right? So,
Yeah,
okay.
it's 60 or 70 from the state, and we needed a match for that, so.
Okay.
But I don't know of anything in answer to your question with
Yeah, no,
regard to offsetting the cost of the
Right.
mandates of teacher evaluations or the Common Core.
Because I know there was conversations about looking for some additional seed money from OPM, but
That's what we had a day at the Capitol yesterday where mayors and first selectmen descending on them. Everybody was asking for seed money from OPM for something, and they're used to us asking that and don't. But I was told that the Appropriations Committee was to forward a budget out of committee today.
They did.
I
and
didn't see the numbers as
They
a result
did,
of
but
that.
I was looking at different numbers. It looks like it's just under, a little bit under the spending cap, and it looks like it's education. I think it was something in education, might have been just early childhood education, social services.
They talked in terms of keeping municipalities whole. That was a
Yes.
lot of the conversation,
Yep.
that they weren't going to do much with. Now, they are bonding a number of those
They're
revenues
bonding.
that they're going to send to us, but education is not. I believe the education cost-sharing fund has remained constant, but I don't know of any particular grant that we can apply for to offset those new mandates that they're going in education. We're in fact hoping for a reversal.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't either.
Okay, thank you.
So regarding historically with the early childhood grants, they have been given to more districts with a lower socioeconomic status.
Distressed municipalities, so, yeah.
Oh, and,
Yeah.
right. So we are not usually the recipients of those
Okay.
grants, and the state has infused money into some of our more needy communities, but we don't fall into that category. So in terms of that.
Okay.
The last time there was a security grant was, I believe, 6 years ago. So that's been
A while.
there's been 2 security grants in my term doing this stuff, and 6 years apart. It's been
Okay.
history.
Any other questions from the board?
I just had one question. On the dean of students for the middle school, would you really need the bus monitors if you had your dean of student who could hop on the bus here and there, really give them a good talking to, or have an assembly in the beginning of the year, or have the DARE officer take a ride on the bus, as a consideration? Because it just sounds like a few potentially bad apples out there that if they were just scared a little bit, not scared, just had someone of authority ride in the bus, to the poor bus driver who's trying to control the situation. My fear is the monitor will just be kind of like the person who's driving the bus. But if it's somebody that the kids are going to be very respectful to in school because of their position of authority, it might actually, stop it. I don't know.
So
Just think about it.
I think that's a creative response, and certainly we consider that. A few things have happened that the bus monitors have become more necessary. One is we have safer and newer buses, and with that comes taller seats, and there's a lot less visibility for our drivers, which they are safer because if there's an accident, they're better protected, which is a good thing. But at the same time, it does limit real driver visibility. So that's a piece of that. And I think there's, we've been doing climate surveys. One of the other mandates that came down was to really start assessing how your climate is in your school. And one of the identified areas was, how things happen on the buses and whether kids feel safe on the bus. And we're trying to respond to that. But certainly, certainly Dr. DeLue, our middle school principal, be happy to tell you about some of her bus experiences, and certainly they are very good at letting kids know that what they do and don't expect, and would have the deans do that as well. But we were really trying to respond to a safety need and perceived need as well. So.
Thank you.
With regard to the safety issue on the buses, why aren't there seatbelts on these buses? Wouldn't that keep kids in their seats?
So that's a
And how
big topic,
is that a
and,
cost consideration
there's
or
a
some other consideration?
considerable cost. I don't know exactly what it would be, and there is while there is some safety in if everybody buckles their seatbelt, there is some safety in that. But currently, bus seats are made so your head, if you crash, hits the front seat, the seat in front of you, and that's it's a big bumper basically. And kids have crashed on buses, and that happens, and they get a bump on their head. And in general, they're pretty safe. In districts that have seat belts, who've made quite an investment to have them, there's always the issue that the seat belt and that little metal thing actually becomes a bit of a safety issue itself if it's not buckled and kids are flinging it around. And the driver certainly cannot get up and walk and check anybody to make sure that they've put on their belt. They're not allowed to leave their seats as long as they're driving and there's students on the bus. But we could get you more information.
Doesn't it have to do with evacuation of the bus?
Yeah.
It also is an evacuation problem.
Won't be able to get out, yeah.
To get to it with the same brain and speed that we get to it.
That's true.
So some will be caught in panic in there, and it's tough to get them out in the situation.
That's true.
And yet we mandate the seatbelts in our passenger cars. And
But you have typically 4 or 6 people with a parent driving that can do it. You have 46 people with a bus driver. You're not gonna get everybody. She may get to 20.
well, I would hope that the 40-some-odd kids weren't all inept at unfastening their seatbelt.
It's safer without the seatbelt.
Right.
It's safer without the seatbelt. The reason the buses are built the way they are is the kids are encapsulated, so they won't bounce around all over the area. But kindergarten, first graders, second graders, they're not adept at that. If a bus caught on fire and the driver was, incapacitated, who would be there to help them out? And that's some of the reasoning behind it. But that's why they hire seats. You say you can't see the kids, but they're going to stay within their seat there. That's the theory behind it. Seatbelts are more dangerous than they are helpful on a school bus.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
and on an annual basis, we teach students how to use the safety equipment on the bus and how to open the back seat and those things. So if students are safe. I don't want to, since this is broadcasted, I don't want to give the impression that our students aren't safe. They are, and we certainly.
Have the cameras on the buses proved effective for, in stemming misbehavior?
The cameras have been wonderful for us having better investigative tools. And again, if you wanted actual information, the middle school principal has vast experience with bus safety.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Judy DeLu, the middle school principal. I've been there approximately 7 years. And I can talk to you a little bit about the bus behavior and about the cameras. We do deal with quite a bit of bus behavior at the middle school. There are quite a few complaints, whether it's an email from a parent, a call from a parent, or children reporting each other. What we do every year in the beginning of the year, we have a program called Positive Behavior Supports and Intervention Supports. And twice a year, every year, once the first 3 days of school, we bring every student in the school. We have 3 empty buses in front of the school, and we bring every student through the school, and we talk about the expectations on the buses. The expectations on the buses are posted, and then we do it again in January, just to make sure that everybody's remembering what the expectations are for the buses. But you have to remember, some of those buses are pretty crowded. There's like 70 children on some of those buses, 3 to a seat, and they're middle school kids, and they're bigger than elementary school children, and they've got their instruments and their backpacks, and they do take up a lot of room. But we deal with bus issues quite frequently. Just between September and February, we had 50 incidents on buses that we had to deal with for discipline, and 26 of those were more like major incidents on the buses. And the major incidents are things like, they might be like harassing or unwanted touch, or just things that needs to be investigated, quite lengthy. And a lot of it is just loud, inappropriate behavior on the bus. The bus driver can't watch the children when she's driving the bus. They have to concentrate on the road. But the neat thing about the cameras is when we do have an incident or a report from either a parent or our students or anything, we're able to look at the cameras and see the incident. And that does help us a little bit, because then we don't have to, before the cameras, I had to interview like 15 kids, you know what I mean, to get the right story off the bus, because, you got 2 parents that are waiting for my response, and they want an answer, and they want me to make sure I'm doing it thoroughly and doing a good job. So we do take that very seriously, but it helps us now that we can talk to a few students, and then we can look at the bus film, if it's working on the bus. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. And then in response to your question, if you wouldn't mind, the Dean of Students, we go on the buses almost every day. The 3 administrators are out there almost every day at the end of the day, or even in the morning. And we're oftentimes asked to go on certain buses and talk to the children, you know. And oftentimes at the end of the day, we'll go on a certain bus, just say, okay, everybody, you gotta make sure that you're doing all these things. And bus drivers feel free to ask us that at any time. I think the Dean of Students could help us with that too. But we have like 19 buses in the back of the school every day at the end. And it would be hard for a person to get on that many school buses, you know. If we could have a monitor on every bus. That would be absolutely the perfect case scenario. But we tend to have more incidents on those buses that are more crowded. You know, so
But
certain
that's not
areas.
all, that's not all the buses, there's certain routes that you're experiencing this problem?
Yeah, there's some buses I never hear about one discipline problem all year long. And there's some buses that aren't as crowded as other buses also. And it's also the makeup of the children on the bus, you know, how many 8th graders, how many 7th graders, how many 5th graders on that run. You know, it all depends on the makeup of the children and how many.
Thank you.
So does that help?
Yeah. it
Do
does.
children ever lose their privilege to ride the bus for poor behavior?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'm allowed to suspend a student off the bus for 10 days. And then after that, if it's a day after that, it's called an expulsion from the bus, just like an expulsion from school would be after the 10-day suspension. So Dr. Lombardo has to get involved, and we have to go through a pre-expulsion hearing and then move forward with that if we want the student off the bus more than 10 days. So it's quite a lengthy process, but we do have children suspended off the bus anywhere from, you know, depends on what they did. You know, they can get a different amount of days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question on Coastal Connections. How many students are enrolled in that program?
I believe the last number I had was 13. 13?
13?
Currently,
And
yes.
last year, how many were there?
I believe we reached in the low 20s. It fluctuates depending on enrollment. We had a couple of tuition students from Old Lyme that came to us for a period of time. Then one went back to Old Lyme. So again, the number fluctuates. We graduated a couple students last year. This year, actually, back up. Last year, we focused more on the program, and we didn't spend enough time advertising and getting the word out there about the program. So our numbers this year were lower than anticipated. But halfway through the year, we've started to, again, publicize the program. And we've done open houses and some mailings, and we're looking at getting a few students by the end of this year, and then hopefully over the summer, the students that weren't successful at the end of this year at the high school will have an opportunity to apply to Coastal Connections.
Now, where does that used to be right across from the high school, right? Is it still
That was
located?
a different program. That was our alternative education
Oh,
program.
okay. Where's Coastal, where's that held? In
That's
this-
right next to Furman's Garage, where the Karen share is.
Okay.
Care-a-Lot.
It shares it with Carolina.
Okay. So, Mike, I heard you say 13 this year, 20 last year, or approximately?
13 right now.
13 now.
Early in the year, the number was higher.
Well, because I'm trying to understand, on the Coastal Connections page, the cost has gone up, and I'm hearing that the enrollment has gone down. I'm trying to understand and get my arms around that a little bit. Can you help me with that?